Now I'm going to introduce our next two speakers, and they're joining us from the United States. There's Marianne Davis and Tanya Duperoy, and they come from the University of Massachusetts Medical School, and they're going to talk to us about including youth in mental health research.
Tanya and I are here because we believe, I gotta figure this out. We believe in the power of technology. Do I aim this at something?
Maybe aim it.
All right. Oh, thank you. Now we've gone too far. There we go. All right. We believe in the power of research to improve the lives of young people living with serious mental health conditions. And we believe that truly the only way to conduct research that will most rapidly touch the most number of lives of young people living with serious mental health conditions is to do it in partnership with young people. This kind of research is called community-based participatory research or participatory action research. And we find that most mental health research is not conducted this way. It's conducted at arm's length from those individuals that we are studying. But we believe that the best way to do this is to involve young people in every aspect of the research that you do. And Tanya and I want to share with you why we think that this is the only way to do it, and in fact, why we think that this is how you should do it. Our research and training center, upon which we base all of our experience here, started about 6 years ago with a grant from two programs of our federal government. Money fell to us, and we were able to start a research program. Prior to receiving that grant, I had been doing research in youth mental health for about 15 years. And while I'd heard of participatory action research and I thought it was a great idea for a variety of reasons, I'd never done it. But this was a wonderful opportunity to be able to do it. And so we wrote into the grant positions for 5 youth with, we'll talk about youth with lived experience as youth with serious mental health conditions. We wrote into the grant 5 positions for youth with lived experience as research assistants. And because I'd never done it before, we wrote into the grant 2 positions for people who were experienced in doing participatory action research, John Delman and Marcia Ellison. And together, we've been able to learn a lot about how to do a strong partnership and really do participatory action research hand in hand with youth with lived experience. So we would like to share with you why. We would like for everybody to try to do more of partnering with youth with lived experience in their research on youth mental health.
So the first reason is that partnering with youth in research moves research findings into something doable more quickly. As a new PAR staff at the RTC, I remember being invited to sit down at a table with our supervisor. We were invited to choose a question about anything that we would want to research. What in our experience as students or as employees with lived experience has impacted us to the point where we would ask a question that research can help answer? We immediately thought of the issues that we have experienced in college. We said things like, I had just gotten diagnosed with bipolar disorder. My school didn't know what to do. They just told me to just go home and take a break. Somebody else said, so I had accommodations for my mental health in school, but my professors didn't really want to do anything about it. By the way, for those who don't know, in the US, it's legally required for faculty to provide academic accommodations, or rather academic supports for people with disabilities. So clearly, we had a question in common, and we found that we wanted to survey college students. We also found in the literature that no one had really researched the exact thing we were interested in. So I can't say it wasn't a struggle to start research from scratch. So I think it was kind of a relief when we went to a conference and saw a presentation of a survey similar to what we wanted to do nationwide, except that it was of college students with lived experience of every age, but we were really interested in young adult students, not college students of every age. So we walked up to Mark Salzer, the researcher, after his presentation, and we said, hey, so we want to do exactly what you did 5 years ago, but just for young adults, not all adults. We want to compare young and older students, and your data set seems to have that information. Can we have it? Surprisingly, he actually accepted, and so we learned how to guard the data, how to analyze it, interpret the findings. We did presentations, posters, and we even wrote a paper that's coming out really soon. Woo! But overall, with our experience and analysis, we were able to take the existing college research and steer its direction. With our research, we were able to conclude that the struggles that Mark found in all college students with lived experience were even harder for young adults. Young adults also spent more time on campus, and that's why supports should be on campus where they are. That recommendation for change for young adults wouldn't really exist today had we never been asked to do our own research at the Transitions RTC. And it just blows my mind that our struggles have actually worked for something good.
Reason number 2, doing research in partnership with youth with lived experience will make your research questions and methods more relevant to their lives. About a year before our first center grant was about to end, we realized that we should start planning for the research that we wanted to put into our submission for what we hoped would be the second center grant. And so we asked all of our staff and our faculty to start developing their ideas and write up proposals, including our what we call participatory action research staff, or PAR staff. And so our PAR staff, based on the research that Tanya was just describing to you, thought about, well, what was the next research step? And they really felt that what they wanted to understand was what were the factors or experiences that young adult college students had that helped them do better academically or got in the way of doing well academically. And they wanted to study that because they wanted to use that to inform some kind of an intervention that would help them do well academically. Me, on the other hand, I just wanted to go ahead and do the intervention. But they convinced me that we really needed a little bit more research first. And so we decided to partner. One of the most consistent messages that we've gotten over the past 6 years in working with young adults with lived experience is the incredible power of peer interventions. We heard from them over and over again about their colleagues' experiences, their own experiences, that having a youth with lived experience help another youth with lived experience was about the most powerful thing you could do. So we felt that we wanted to do a piece of research that would first investigate a little bit more about what we needed to know to shape a peer intervention, but that what we wanted to do was a peer academic coach model, and that we wanted to then develop it and pilot test it. So we started looking around for a model that might either we could apply or maybe we could adapt and make it more suitable for college students with lived experience. And we found some folks at Wright State University who had developed a peer academic coach model, but for freshmen with autism spectrum disorders. So we looked it over and we thought, well, we can work with this. It needs to be adjusted somewhat, but that research should help us to figure out what that needs to be. And the folks at Wright State said, well, we'd hope that you would pilot this at our site. And we thought, great, this would be wonderful. So they got on the director of their counseling center on the phone with us on a conference call, and their director of disability services, and we talked with them about what we wanted to do, and we were all excited, and we hit a wall. It was a wall of fear. It was, you can't have students helping other students with mental health conditions. That's too dangerous. It's too risky. We'd be putting far too much responsibility on those students to be helping other students. Fear, fear, fear was all we could hear. And I looked over at Tanya and Amanda, and their eyes were popping out. They couldn't believe what they were hearing, but They took a deep breath and they respectfully started offering a variety of reasons why it was perfectly reasonable to have students helping other students. The director of counseling wanted it to be clinicians in training because clinicians knew how to handle all of these risks to help young people do better academically. Essentially, they were trying to explain that was overkill. You didn't need that. Peers were really powerful with other peers. And we were all completely convinced, but they were not. And we couldn't convince them. So, we got off the phone and we said, well, should we think about that clinician in training model? But no, Tanya and Amanda were really clear, and they were absolutely right that what we needed to do was a peer academic coach model. And so we started looking around for other partners, and we found Boston University, and they were incredibly excited. And so we've just launched this research that we think is going to be much more relevant to the lives of young college students with living mental health conditions, and essentially a lot better than what those experts would have had us do.
So, reason number 3, partnering with youth in research helps spread important information to those who need it. As a center, we're always talking about dissemination, which is sharing the wealth of information with the masses. In our experience, involving young adults in dissemination helps our cause because we do it in a very special way. We bring our products like tip sheets and videos to other young adults, and they review them. And since us young adults take our jobs very seriously, we tend to tear things apart just a little bit until it suits what we think is best. I remember one of our most popular tip sheets on disclosure in the workplace that was brought to our Department of Mental Health statewide Youth Advisory Council. And as young people, they went straight to work. They tell us that their biggest question was their legal rights during interviews and while working. They wanted to know things like whether they can be asked about their disability or not. And so we changed it, and it came back as a product that was popular and relevant, and it's one of our top tip sheets to this day. Inspired by this influence young adults had over us, we started our own National Youth Advisory Board, or YAB for short. These youth were incredibly helpful. During that year, we spent creating that center grant that Marianne was just talking about. As a center, we were pretty nervous about that actually, and so to beat some of this anxiety, we planned for months on end, waiting for the announcement from the grant funders about what was going to be required. These requirements are what we call the priorities. And when we finally got them in April of last year, we ravenously read and digested all that the funders had to say about what we had to do. We saw that our funders were giving anyone in the country the opportunity to also comment on these priorities before they became finalized. We decided to work with our Youth Advisory Board to make a comment representing youth with lived experience. We talked about what needed to be done by the center. We talked about, if youth had any say and had an actual research center for young adults, what would they do? And one of the things we discussed in our calls was that this phenomenon of youth-to-youth credibility. If there is a youth talking about their experiences and their struggles and what needs to change versus a young adult saying the same exact thing, the other youth are more likely to be interested in listening to their peer. Our center had been using this instant credibility from youth to help present and disseminate information at conferences and other places. And we really wanted to see that be a priority for other centers across the United States. So, of course, we commented, and we submitted as youth and said what we wanted, and we waited 3 months for those final priorities to come out to see if there would be any changes from those suggestions. Now, you have to know, we were told that changes are never made. The funder usually explained why a suggestion is either impossible or why it just doesn't even relate to what they're funding, and then just no changes are made. So of course, we were kind of defeatist when we were reading these final priorities. We said, whatever, there's not going to be an actual change. And so we sadly glossed over the papers and said, and we read our changes, none, after each comment, changes, still none, as we read down the list. But then all of a sudden we saw one that was different. It actually considered a quote from our comment and said that the new requirement is that, that young adults be involved in outreach for dissemination. Yeah, we were in shock. We just made a change in the requirements for our country's only research and training center focused on youth with mental health conditions and their efforts as students and workers. This change said that our funders saw that youth voice was important and that their involvement in its dissemination is very valuable.
And the final reason why we think that all of us should be doing research in partnership with youth is because it is doable. So as you've heard, we've been working in partnership with youth for the past 6 years. And we've developed an incredible partnership. One of the young adults on our staff actually led the workshop that we offered here yesterday on involving youth voice in systems and research and in their own care. Tanya is here actually giving her first big talk, and it's a TED Talk in front of all of you, and she's actually also a producer of a YouTube show in which we share research findings in a heck of a lot more entertaining format than most of us old stodgy folks would usually do. And while we're here, there are young folks back at our shop, and they're collecting data and doing literature searches and writing things up, and it's a fabulous partnership, but it wasn't always that way. As I said, I had never done participatory action research before, and so when we started our grant and we had a couple of people with some experience doing it, we felt like, we kind of handled some problems as they came along, and like, we're doing okay. We've trained them in how to do research, and they've trained us in how to do social media and technology, and it seemed to be working quite well. So if any kind of problems came along, the PAR staff would go to their supervisor, and their supervisor, would hear about what was going on, and they would come to the faculty, the leadership of the center, and we'd, go behind closed doors because we wanted to be able to, have confidentiality about some of the issues that were coming up, and we'd debate and try to figure out what would be the right solution to the problem that was going on, and we'd come up with some solution, and we'd come out of the room and we'd try to enact some changes. And after a little while, we sort of found out that we were scaring the pants off the PAR staff by doing this. We didn't really know, and we certainly didn't intend, but they had gone and talked to our deputy director of PAR research, who was an individual with lived experience, and he helped them understand their legal rights and how to talk to their employers. And they went and talked to a really beloved faculty, older faculty on our staff, and through that, they actually communicated that from their perspective, they knew when there were kind of problems going on, they could feel that, and all of a sudden they'd see us disappear into some room, and then we'd come out and we'd make some change, like, okay, now you're gonna work on this other project, or you're gonna sit over there, and it's really disorienting and scary. And we hadn't intended for it to happen that way, and we realized we were doing research in partnership with youth, but we weren't doing problem solving in partnership with youth. And so, we started to get it. And they started doing a lot more problem solving and coming to us and making suggestions, and we started trying to do it together. And so, for example, they came to us and they said, we want to help each other a lot more, so we think, we should have our desks closer by. That will make it really more helpful. So I moved all the desks together. But what they found after a while was it mostly just had them separate from the rest of the research staff. So they said, we want to be out in the projects like the rest of the research staff so that we're around everybody else. We said, okay, off we go with the desks, and we moved them back to their other places. And what we found is that essentially if we have humility and we have flexibility, that we are really able to partner not just around the research, but on the problem solving of how do we work together most effectively to make the changes in research and to conduct relevant and meaningful research in true partnership with youth with lived experience. And so now we have, I think, a relatively trusting experience with one another, and we have Tanya giving a TED Talk. We've got our National Advisory Board, and we really feel like we're able to do youth partnered research to what we hope will change the world most rapidly for the benefit of young people with lived experience of mental health conditions. And so we just want to go back over for what we hope you have heard are really reasonable, compelling reasons why we should all be doing more research for youth with lived experience in partnership with them. First of all, it quickly moves your research into something doable. It enhances the relevance of the research that you do. It delivers research findings into the hands of the people that are going to be most affected by it. And it is absolutely something that is doable.
And so we wanted to leave you guys with some thoughts. We went to our statewide Young Adult Advisory Council, and we asked them this question. What would you say to researchers out there that still have doubts about partnering with young adults? So one of them said, stop being a kink in the hose, because you know what happens when you hold it. It explodes. So why not just let it flow?
Thank you.